Hola, and welcome to this online lesson. I am Mr. Hoven, and today we are going to continue our westward expansion unit looking at the war with Mexico. That's right. Keep in mind, we've been adding land to the United States territory, continuing to push westward. That idea of manifest destiny, it's God's will that we expand ourselves from the sea to shining sea. So we are looking at starting to bump into Mexico a little bit, especially after we've annexed Texas, and tensions are rising. Let's go ahead and get started. Now, before we look at the war, I want to take a minute to just look at a few territories that were very important and kind of had a key part in the beginning of these tensions with Mexico. And the first was the New Mexico territory. In the early 1800s, New Mexico was a vast region between Texas and California. It included the present-day states of New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, and Utah, and parts of Colorado and Wyoming. When Mexico won its independence in 1821, it inherited New Mexico, or the New Mexico territory, from Spain. The Spanish had tried to keep Americans away from this area, fearing that Americans would want to take it over. However, the Mexican government welcomed these American traders, and it hoped that trade would boost the economy of the province. Traders began coming into this area of New Mexico and settling around Santa Fe, which was the capital of the territory at that time. Trade began to increase. However, Americans began settling the area, and many saw New Mexico as part of the manifest destiny of the United States. This will eventually lead to some tension. The next land that we're going to take a look at is the California territory. And initially, missionaries came to this territory and to set up missions to convert Native Americans to Christianity. Native Americans were also farming the land and worked at weaving and other crafts. And after Mexico gained its independence from Spain in 1821, California became a state in the new Mexican nation. Now, in the 1840s, Americans reached California for the first time and sent back impressive tales of the vast lands and the natural resources. Again, looking at why do people move, here we see it. Land, vast land, and bountiful natural resources. After this, and more individuals began moving further and further into California, Americans began calling for the annexation of this land. They believed that the nation would be safer if the border of the United States was actually the Pacific Ocean and not some foreign country like Mexico. And they also wanted to build ports on the West Coast in order to increase the amount of trade they have with East Asia. Again, another area that the United States is starting to think that they should have claim to. It's going to lead to tensions with Mexico. Now, President James K. Polk was the individual who was able to get Texas admitted into the Union along with the Oregon Territory. Now, because of this, the tensions between Mexico and the United States were a little bit elevated because Mexico still claimed Texas as its own. The two nations also disagreed about the Texas-Mexico border. The United States insisted that the Rio Grande River formed the border between Mexico and Texas. However, Mexico claimed that the border lay along the Nueces River, 150 miles further north. Furthermore, President Polk saw New Mexico and California as belonging to the United States, and after Mexico refused to sell the lands, he plotted to gain them through war. But he knew that he must find a way to make Mexico strike first. Now, as the tensions were increasing, Polk sent John Slidell to Mexico to propose a deal. Slidell was authorized to offer $30 million for California and New Mexico in return for Mexico's acceptance of the Rio Grande as the Texas boundary. In addition, the United States would take over payment of Mexico's debts to American citizens. The Mexican government refused to discuss this offer and announced its intention to reclaim Texas. Now, again, that's going to lead to increased tensions because not only is Mexico refusing the United States offer, they're also saying, we're going to go back and take Texas back to us. Again, tensions are rising, and it's about to boil over. So again, if we remember, Polk knew that he had to get Mexico to strike first. He did not want to be the aggressor in this because it would be easier to declare war through Congress if Mexico attacks first. So he ordered General Zachary Taylor to march his soldiers across the disputed borderland of Texas and Mexico. And on April 25, 1846, Mexican soldiers attacked Taylor's force. He sent home a decree that hostilities may now be considered as commenced or begun. On May 11th, the president told Congress that Mexico had invaded our territory and shed American blood on American soil. And the war had begun. So now that Mexico had, in fact, attacked the United States Armed Forces, it was time for war. Yeah, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Sorry, just got a little carried away. But it was time for war, and Polk had a plan for the war. First, his goal was to drive Mexican troops out of the disputed Texas-Mexico border region. Second, seize New Mexico and California territories. And third, take Mexico City. Zachary Taylor was able to accomplish the first goal of this plan. By early 1847, his army had captured the towns of Matamoros, Monterey, and Buena Vista, and the Texas border was secure. The second part of the goal occurred in 1846 when American forces captured New Mexico's capital of Santa Fe. In 1847, California was also totally controlled by the United States, so that happened relatively quickly. In Part 3, by mid-September, General Winfield Scott marched his army to Veracruz, laid a 3-week siege on this city, and then fought its way 300 miles to Mexico City. By mid-September 1847, the Americans had taken the city. The Mexican government surrendered, and it was time for them to surrender half of its territory. So under the Mexican cession, Mexico seceded, also known as gave up California and New Mexico to the United States for $15 million. This occurred in 1848 along with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, where Mexico gave up Texas and agreed to the Rio Grande as the border, that's the Rio Grande River, as the border between Texas and Mexico. And a few years later, in 1853, the United States paid Mexico $10 million for the Gadsden Purchase, a strip of land along the southern edge of present-day Arizona and New Mexico. With the Gadsden Purchase, the U.S. mainland reached its present size. That about wraps things up for today. As you look over your homework before class, please keep in mind what lands were added to the United States that we talked about during this lesson. Why were they added? What were some reasons people maybe moved west? And how is it an example of manifest destiny? And we'll go over those and talk more about the expansion westward next time. We'll see you then.